50,000 people packed the Chicago ballpark to watch a man blow up a crate of records, and before the night was over, they had burned the field, stormed the diamond, and forced a major league team to forfeit a game it never got to play. It was July 12, 1979. Comiskey Park, on the south side of Chicago. The White Sox against the Detroit Tigers, a tree-night doubleheader on a warm Thursday evening. Nobody remembers the baseball. They remember the explosion. To understand how it happened, you have to start with a disc jockey. His name was Steve Dahl. 24 years old. Loud, quick, and furious, because a few months earlier, the radio he worked for had flipped its format overnight. On Christmas Eve, 1978, the station went all disco. Rock was out. Dahl was out with it. He landed at a new station, WLUP, The Loop, 97.9 on the FM dial, and he turned his grudge into an act. Every morning he declared war on disco. He called his listeners the insane Coho Lips anti-disco army. He'd cue up a disco hit, drag the needle screaming across the vinyl, and blow it up with a sound effect, a mock explosion, over and over, live on the air. It wasn't subtle. But in the summer of 1979, it was everywhere. Because disco, at that moment, ruled the world. Saturday Night Fever had made it a phenomenon. Studio 54 was the center of the universe. Disco was on every station, in every club, at the top of every chart. And to a certain kind of young rock and roll fan, it felt like an invasion, polished, mechanical, and inescapable. Dahl gave that resentment a rallying cry. Disco sucks. He wasn't alone. Across the country, rock stations were running the same joke, selling the same t-shirts, feeding the same grudge. But nobody turned it into a live event. Nobody thought to bring the bonfire to a ballpark. Meanwhile, on the south side, the White Sox were drowning. The team was bad and the seats were empty. It was owned by Bill Veeck, baseball's greatest showman, the man who years earlier had sent a 3'7" man named Eddie Gadel to the plate as a publicity stunt. Veeck lived for the spectacle. And his son, Mike Veeck, who ran the team's promotions, was desperate for a crowd. Mike had the idea to put Steve Dahl and the White Sox together. They called it Disco Demolition Night. The offer was almost too good. Bring a disco record to the park. Pay just 98 cents at the gate, a wink at 97.9 on the dial. Hand your record over on the way in. And between the two games of the doubleheader, Steve Dahl would pile them all in center field and blow them sky high. The Sox figured a good night might draw 20,000 people. On a normal evening they were pulling half that. They had no idea what they had just set loose. By the time the gates opened, the crowd wasn't 20,000. It was pushing 50, and thousands more were still trying to climb their way in. They came from everywhere. The parking lots filled and overflowed. Traffic backed up onto the Dan Ryan Expressway as people simply abandoned their cars and walked. The ballpark's real capacity was around 44,000. That night, by most estimates, more than 50,000 packed inside, and thousands more were locked out on the street, scaling the walls, forcing the gates, pouring in without paying. Inside, it stopped feeling like a baseball game almost immediately. The air was thick with the smell of beer and marijuana. The collection boxes at the gate filled up fast, so fans just carried their records to their seats, and then started sailing them. Vinyl records skimmed out of the upper deck like saucers, slicing through the air, sticking into the grass, whizzing past players' heads. The Detroit Tigers took the field for the first game genuinely afraid of getting hit. Detroit won that opener. Almost no one in the building cared. They weren't there for baseball. They were there for the explosion. You could feel it building all night. Cherry bombs and firecrackers went off in the stands. Fistfights broke out in the aisles. Players ducked into the dugouts between innings to get away from the flying vinyl. This was not a baseball crowd. It was something closer to a powder keg with a scoreboard. Between games, the main event began. Steve Dahl rode out onto the field in an open army jeep, dressed in camouflage fatigues and a military helmet, waving to a stadium that had turned into a rock concert. A large wooden crate sat in center field, packed with thousands of records. He grabbed a microphone and led 50,000 people in the chant. Disco sucks. Disco sucks. Disco sucks. Then he set it off. The blast was enormous. It tore a crater in the outfield grass, threw burning vinyl into the air, and sent smoke rolling across the diamond. For a second the crowd just roared. And then they came over the wall. Thousands of them. Fans spilled out of the stands and flooded the field, sliding across the grass, ripping the bases out of the ground and running off with them, setting small fires, spinning the batting cage in circles, climbing the foul poles. Someone stole home plate. The pitcher's mound was clawed apart. Bonfires flickered in the outfield where the crate had burned. Up in the booth, broadcaster Harry Caray pleaded over the public address system for everyone to please return to their seats. It did nothing. Then Bill Veeck himself, an old man who had lost part of a leg in the war, walked out onto his own field, took a microphone, and begged the crowd to stop. They ignored him too. It took the Chicago Police Department, in full riot gear, to finally clear the diamond. 39 people were arrested. A handful were injured. The field was a wreck, scorched, torn, and unplayable. The umpires walked out, looked at the ruined grass, and made the only decision they could. There would be no second game. The next afternoon, the American League made it official, and pinned on the White Sox a defeat that no box score could ever explain. American League President Lee MacPhail reviewed the chaos and ruled that the White Sox had made their own field unplayable. He forfeited the second game to the Detroit Tigers, an official 9-0 loss for a game that was never played. It stands today as one of the last forfeits in Major League Baseball history. Baseball simply does not forfeit games. This one did, because a promotion swallowed the sport whole. Consider how rare that is. In the century plus of modern Major League Baseball, forfeits can be counted on two hands, and most of the others came from teams too broke or too short-handed to field 9 men. Disco demolition is the only one most people can name. The only one caused by a party. Someone had to answer for it. That someone was Mike Veeck, the young promotions man who dreamed the whole thing up. In the aftermath he became, by his own account, nearly unemployable in the game he loved. His career stalled for years. He drifted, and he struggled, and it nearly broke him, before he slowly rebuilt himself in the minor leagues, of all places, spending the rest of his life staging exactly the kind of joyful, ridiculous ballpark promotions that Disco Demolition had made radioactive. But the meaning of that night grew far bigger than one forfeited doubleheader. Somewhere in the years that followed, people began calling July 12, 1979, the day Disco died. And within a year or so, Disco really did collapse, vanishing off the radio and the charts almost as fast as it had risen. The two things may have had nothing to do with each other. But the image was too perfect to let go of, a stadium full of mostly young white men, cheering as records, many of them made by Black, Latino, and gay artists, were blown to pieces in the middle of the country. And that is where historians still disagree. Some argue that Disco Demolition was exactly what it appeared to be, a backlash with an ugly undercurrent, a cultural attack on disco's roots wearing the costume of a radio stunt. Others insist it was nothing so deliberate, just a mob of rowdy rock fans, cheap admission, too much beer, and a promotion that spiraled completely out of control. Steve Dahl has spent decades rejecting the idea that it was ever about race or hate at all. The honest answer is that the record is genuinely disputed, and thoughtful people who have studied it land in very different places. Where the story is contested, it deserves to be told that way, plainly. What is not disputed is what the night changed. Baseball learned, in one terrifying evening, what it means to hand an entire stadium over to a crowd and a spectacle at the same time. The wild, anything-goes promotional era that Bill Veeck had perfected, the stunts, the giveaways, the showman's belief that you could always sell one more ticket with one more gimmick, suddenly looked reckless. Front offices grew cautious. The circus came off the field. The era of the wild stadium giveaway didn't end that night, but it was never quite so fearless again. Every team that has ever weighed a promotion against the risk of a crowd turning has, in some small way, been standing in the shadow of that burning outfield. And a single summer night at a last-place ballpark became one of the most replayed, most argued over images in American pop culture, the moment a baseball promotion tore loose from the ballpark and turned into a symbol of something much larger than a game. 50,000 people came to watch a man blow up a box of records. They left having burned a field, forced a forfeit, and lit a fuse that people are still fighting over nearly 50 years later. So here is the question. Was it really the night disco died, or just the night a ballpark lost control of its own crowd, and we have spent the decades since telling ourselves a bigger, cleaner story than what actually happened? Follow for more.